how do we get in the zone day to day where we are firing and wiring our brain and our body into a place where we are performing at the highest level we can be at, optimizing physical, mental, and emotional, getting to that 10 out of 10, that elusive 10 out of 10, but also having an awareness of that when you're falling short in some areas, to give yourself some grace, to give yourself some compassion, give yourself more self-love. And so this blend of being able to merge the hard and the soft skills and to give yourself space when you're not 10 out of 10 in all areas, I think that actually allows you to get to that place in a healthier way instead of that ultra competitive way.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Keynote Curators podcast. I'm Seth Dechtman, your Keynote Curator. Our guest today is Jeff Salzenstein. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for nailing my last name. Not many people get it. And you
as I was saying it, I was like, oh my gosh, did I get it right?
And it happens so often where people, before they say, how do you pronounce it? And they have it. And then when they say it, they butcher it. But you absolutely were in the zone. You nailed it.
All right. I am in the zone. So let's get right into the heart of the matter. You know, we talk about the zone. We talk about all these branded, framed up language around performance. You talk about the zone of excellence in your work as a keynote speaker and as a tennis professional and somebody who's trained elite performing tennis players. Just bring us into that zone of excellence that you provide to make an impact on professionals in your speaking world.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my journey started in tennis, and through a lot of adversity, injuries, almost losing my career after I turned pro and playing Michael Chang on a big stage at the US Open, I started digging into why my body and mind and why I was struggling to get to the next level. And so for the last 25 years, I've been studying high performance principles that allow people to get into flow state or in the zone, lots of different definitions and terms out there. And I really take a holistic approach to helping leaders, helping humans, helping organizations, anyone that is a high achiever. I help them understand that this is a holistic approach to physical, mental, and emotional health. And when you lock all of that in, that's how you can really get into the zone in business and in life. And so that's my calling. That's my passion. It's something that I've been deeply passionate about. It probably have enjoyed the study of all of this more than actually playing tennis. And tennis was the vehicle for me to work on this as an athlete and then as a coach and now as a success coach and speaker. So I am in my zone when it comes to following my purpose and being aligned with impacting as many people as I can.
So say that again. There was three, I look at them as dials, right? You were talking about the physical, the emotional, and the mental.
Correct. Or body, mind, soul, mind, and soul.
Body, mind, and soul. So to use a line out of Spinal Tap, it goes to 11. If all of those dials are dialed up as high as you can go, is it optimal to have everything on 10, all three dials, all three cylinders, all three realms? Is that the super hyper turbo flow state?
You know, it's interesting because I look at the zone as almost two different things. The zone is that state when you're competing or you're focusing on something that you're just totally immersed in and you lose kind of track of time, everything slows down. That's one type of zone. And then the zone that I feel like you were asking about, referring to, is like, how do we get in the zone day to day where we are firing and wiring our brain and our body into a place where we are performing at the highest level we can be at, but we're doing it with this focus of also giving us some grace, because high achievers are historically known for being very driven. And one of the things that drives us is to being better, better, better. It's never good enough where we are. So it's this complex dance between optimizing physical, mental, and emotional, getting to that 10 out of 10, that elusive 10 out of 10, but also having an awareness of that when you're falling short in some areas, to give yourself some grace, to give yourself some compassion, give yourself more self-love. And so I think what makes it unique, the work that I do, is I played against Pete Sampras, Michael Chang, practiced against Roger Federer. I've seen the best athletes in the world up close and personal. And I've hit 130-mile-an-hour serves. It's a very hard driving world. And I understand the pressure cooker there. And the flip side is I've gone deep into the soft skills, emotional intelligence, the mental health side. And so this blend of being able to merge the hard and the soft skills and to give yourself space when you're not 10 out of 10 in all areas, I think that actually allows you to get to that place in a healthier way instead of that ultra competitive way.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what you're saying in concept makes perfect sense, even common sense, right? But then when you're in the heat of the battle, whether you're in the second round against Michael Chang at Arthur Ashe Stadium, or you're dealing with the high pressure corporate world or the challenges within an organization to perform and to produce at a high elite level, to know when the dials aren't, I'm using 10 as an example, but optimal, that balance between those three areas, it takes a self awareness to know that, well, I'm not, if 40% is all I have, but I'm giving 40%, then that's actually 100% of what I have to give. And that grace that you talk about, it requires a self awareness to even have the grace to give yourself. Talk a little bit about how one can develop that or access that, or is that something that can be trained over time?
Absolutely. It's a skill that can be trained. And I'm really fortunate that I have an opportunity to share my message, get on stages, share with a large group of people. But I also have a coaching practice where I get behind the scenes, I get behind the curtain as someone's corner man, one on one. I work with some very successful people, and you'd be very surprised at what their self talk is like, the level of anxiety that they experience as high level athletes and in the corporate world. And so you really start to learn that people are driven by different things and for different reasons. And a lot of times it stems from, again, that feeling of not being worthy and good enough. So I'm going to prove to the world and make a gazillion dollars or be number one in the world at whatever I do. And what's challenging is that you get to that mountaintop and you haven't developed the mental and the emotional intelligence and the skills to be able to handle that. And that's where the anxiety, the depression, the external validation that people are seeking, that's what takes you out of the zone. That's what drains your energy. That's what keeps you under chronic stress. And so, yes, absolutely, there are specific breathing techniques. They're quite obvious. There's a lot of people are struggling with sleep, getting outside into nature. I'm just naming a few of the pro fundamentals that I give people. And what's so interesting is when I hear stories about people struggling and I ask them, well, are you doing this, this, and this? Invariably, the answer is no. They're not doing the basic fundamentals. And so these high achievers, they know something is off and these common sense are there for them, but I think they don't really have a plan and they don't really know what to do. And so that's where accountability in place. That's why everyone needs a coach. Every sports team has a coach. So why don't corporate leaders, why don't organizations have a coach or multiple coaches helping them with these things? Because it is the secret sauce. It is what provides the energy, the productivity, the creativity, the innovation, and the longevity over a long period of time. So I'm all about playing the long game, installing these daily habits and fundamentals into people's lives that are very common sense, but they're often overlooked. And when people start making these shifts, they change really fast. And that's what's so beautiful about merging this high performance drive to be the best with the softer skills, with the mental and the emotional side of things.
You hear the word life work balance. I think it's, as you're saying, it's all integrated, right? And that awareness, you talk about conscious breathing, the technical term isn't low hanging fruit, but some of the more obvious or common or easily accessible ones, taking a walk out in nature, doing some breathing, getting your sleep organized in a way that provides you access to more optimal performance. All these things are doable, but if you're not doing them, then they can be the Mount Everest.
That's
I
right.
personally have been taking on sleep more and more. I have young kids, I travel a lot, there's a lot of distractions. It comes down to a case of I don't want to limit it to just managing, but a lot of it is energy management. And whether you're on the court and where's your mind located at a key point in the set or a key point in the match. I'm a recreational tennis player. Sometimes I'm in the middle of a serve and I'm wondering if I locked the door or left the window open. And that's how poor or that's how non-optimal my concentration is at that point. And the same thing happens in the corporate world. And how do you manage that energy and manage that focus? And it sounds to me like the zone of excellence, which is one aspect of what you do as a keynoter, you really dial into that flow state. I want to take a turn a little bit here. Something I know that very near and dear to your heart and is a driving force behind what you do. And that's your relationship with your brother. I'm getting goosebumps a little bit. And, he passed. He struggled with drug use and he was very close with you and you learned a lot. And from the tragedy and are now it's a calling that you bring to the world. Can you just share with us that journey and how you integrate the lessons you've learned there with the mental health aspect, the emotional aspect, and connecting your heart to this high pressure, high performing elite world that you live in and that you coach in and that you support?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Thank you for teeing it up. You know, we're time sensitive here, so I can't go into my full story, but my professional tennis
Well,
journey.
I will just say this, Jeff, take your time. Take your
Okay.
time. It's
Well,
your
my
time.
professional tennis journey was a fascinating one. I wasn't supposed to be a pro tennis player. I wasn't even supposed to be good enough to go to Stanford. I found my way at Stanford. I transformed my serve in college. I grew 3 inches. I went from being at the bottom of the lineup to the top of the lineup to being an All American to a team captain playing for the greatest college tennis coach of all time. I learned many leadership lessons as an 18, 19, 20, 21-year old under the greatest coach of all time in tennis in college. And then I go on the pro tour and I shoot up the rankings and I play Michael Chang in front of 25,000 people. If you talk about a pressure cooker, you're walking out on that stage in front of 25,000 and millions watching on TV, and your idol, John McEnroe, is announcing the match. And I always tell people that, after I won the first set against Michael Chang, the dominant thought in my head was, thank God you didn't embarrass yourself tonight. And I share that because most of us are extraordinary in different ways, but we can also be ordinary in our thinking. And it was that limiting belief that kept me from possibly being the number 2 player in the world. And that really became kind of when my eyes started opening to the mental side of things and, hey, I've got to fix these things. And then when my body started breaking down at the age of 25, I had 2 surgeries before the age of 25 when I had signed with an agent and my career was about to go like this. The disaster struck. So now I'm rehabbing. And that was when I went to my first yoga class at 24 years old. I started eating organic food before it was considered cool.
And
I started.
just a side note, for a college student in California at Stanford to have not attended a yoga class until they were 24, that's a whole separate breakout session story
I didn't
there
go to
because
Berkeley. I didn't go to Berkeley. I went to Stanford. That's the
you
difference.
went
If I
you
went
went
to
to the other
Berkeley,
side.
I'd have hair down here and I would have been certified in Ashtanga yoga. But yeah, so I just dove deep into why my body was breaking down, why I had these limiting beliefs. And through this intense study, not knowing that 25 years later I would be teaching this to leaders, I broke the top 100 in the world for the first time at the age of 30. At the time, I think I was the oldest American to break the top 100 for the first time ever. So a lot of superstars, they break the top 100 like Agassi, Andre Agassi when he was 18. It took me 7 years. So there's a story in there around perseverance and resilience. And that's probably what's on the back of my jersey is resilience and perseverance. So it's no accident that I'm teaching this today and have that DNA from playing tennis. You know what it's like to lose tennis matches, lose points, have to bounce back every point to come back. It's just in my DNA. But a turning point in my life took place when I was 34 years old and I was burned out and stressed out from playing 11 years on the tour, traveling alone in hotel rooms, not making a lot of money, just battling out there. And so that's why I think from that standpoint, I can really relate to people that are burned out and stressed out because I've lived it. I've been in between the lines, getting bloody and getting sweaty and dust all over me trying to figure this out. But that turning point at 34 was when I walked into my brother's bedroom. He was 17 at the time, a high school senior, and he was passed out on the floor, foam coming out of his mouth, a white foamy substance, dribbling out of his mouth. And he was overtaken by a cocktail of drugs. And that was the beginning of this wild journey that I went on with my brother. It landed him in prison for 4 years. I was coaching him while he would call me from the prison house phone every week, like, what do I do next? How do I change my life? I gave him Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins. And so we went on like a 17-year journey in and out of addiction. And so I've seen firsthand where a family member who was at rock bottom, 50 days in solitary confinement, 4 years in prison, transforms his life in prison, body, mind, and soul. I got to watch it firsthand and learn from him. I learned just as much from my clients. I learned just as much from Eric as I teach, as I share. And he gets out of prison and he wins his own TED Talk. He wins a speaking contest, 600 people. He's first place. He gets his own TED Talk within 2 years of getting out of prison. So he was going like this with his trajectory. And unfortunately, the addiction started to overtake him, the pressure of success. It came too fast. He didn't have that foundation. And while I tried to give him the foundation, there were some leaks in the dam, if you will, around the addiction. And we ultimately lost him just over a year ago and to addiction. I think the lesson here is that, at least for me, is that I've seen what it's like to play at the highest level in sport and how hard it is and the pressure and to be able to overcome it and move through it. And then I've also seen someone succumb to the extreme pressure. So really what this is about, Seth, is helping people understand that pressure is unavoidable. We will be experiencing pressure and stress in our personal and professional lives. It's how we navigate it. It's how we deal with it. It's how we learn to decrease it, how we get into our bodies and our hearts and our breath. And we come from a more of a heart-centered place rather than ego, where we're looking for external validation outside of ourselves. And so that extreme perspective, I think, makes me a unique coach and speaker.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks for sharing that. I know it's not easy, but I also know that you're called to. So it's like kind of a duality there.
It's
Um,
tricky.
Probably
Yes,
doesn't get easier. Um, you know, and a couple of things, young men, I think in particular, there's an appetite and a real hunger for guidance, a Sherpa, a mentor, a
yeah,
coach, call it what you like, a principal, your little league coach, whatever it is. That I don't want to sweep society, but I think that if there was more of that, more volume of that for young men, I think it would make an impact. And, Eric's contribution goes far beyond, him being with us. And literally, he's with us right now in this podcast.
that's right.
I'm struck by the precariousness and the fragility of it all. Because 50 days in solitary, I mean, I hear the words, I understand the language. I can't even like conceive, right? And that's the power of this spirit and these emotions and the pressure. And when we fall down, and here you have somebody who is so strong, so willful, and yet so fragile, and the situation has become so precarious. And I think that part of the gift is, and part of the distinctions that you're providing to people, albeit we hope not as tragic, um, have a profound impact at whatever level. It could be a promotion, it could be a job interview, it could be a performance report, it could be an education avenue you want to take to expand your capacities. And like you said, there's pressure everywhere. And along with the pressure comes what? Chaos, uncertainty, aspirations, that internal voice. What are you seeing, Jeff? I mean, you deal with high performing, I don't even want to say alpha types, but high performing executives who are leading teams, who have big resources behind them. What are you seeing in the world that might be a through line or a commonality of what, again, I don't want to generalize things, what
Sure.
challenges there are? And then what are you seeing that you're bringing that's making a difference for people to transform them or have power over them or be able to govern them and manage that in a way that makes a difference?
A fantastic question. I touched on it a little bit earlier. If we can just distill, and I coached tennis after I played pro tennis. I coached on a tennis court. I was passionate about communication, breaking things down in a technical way on the forehand and the backhand, making YouTube videos for tennis instruction for years. So I've been absolutely obsessed as a coach to be able to communicate a message that people can hear and that they can actually take real time, tangible strategies to help them shift, whether I'm giving a keynote in front of 1,000 people or whether we're just having a conversation right here, like this is our game plan, this is what we're going to do. So a few things strike me with that question. Number one, this really powerful concept that a lot of what drives us is this feeling that we're not good enough and we're not worthy. So I really think at a deep, profound, heart-centered level, we need to work on that part, that we are enough, that we are worthy. Even if we fall short in some areas, we give ourselves grace. That's one big thing. The second is my brother was an extreme example of the external validation, money, power, control, the next business deal.
Admiration.
Absolutely. And so when you're led by ego in that way, that's when you can go down that dark road. And that's where chronic stress, anxiety, burnout, and depression. So if you're listening to this and you're struggling in some of these areas, you get an opportunity to look at where are you seeking external validation, whether it's from the job or whether it's in a relationship or whatever it is, that the job is an inside job, is to go this way to work on yourself. And
Mm,
tennis is the ultimate sport to do that because you're the only one on the court. There's no
yeah.
one helping you. You win and you lose. You live by the sword, you die by the sword, and you have to work on your own stuff. And so the external validation piece is huge, always striving to get validation. And what these leaders realize when they work with me and they're having panic attacks or they're feeling anxious, they're like, I can retire in 2 years with all the money, but I can barely function. They're completely out of alignment with what they could be focusing on. And at the end of the day, we're trading these things for the most important thing, which is our health. Our health is our most important thing. And yet in our culture, we're chasing the money and the status and the success. We've been conditioned to do that. So as soon as you can start to shift your mindset and your approach to, hey, I'm going to love myself enough to take care of myself, that's when some really powerful things happen. I want to share two quick stories around this. A powerful message I want to share around this is that, well, first of all, here's some statistics I want to give you. We have 60,000 thoughts on average every day. 80% of our thoughts are negative, and 90% of the thoughts we have today are the exact same thoughts that we had yesterday. So if you want to make changes in your life, but you're thinking the same things, the same thoughts will lead to the same choices, which lead to the same behaviors, which lead to the same experiences. And so that's why it's so hard for us to change because we're living in the matrix, thinking in thought loops every single day. So you talked about self-reflection and self-awareness. That's the first step, is to be aware of your thinking and how it could be sabotaging your performance. Some more research I want to share before I get into this story. Negativity is 4 to 7 times more powerful than positivity. And it's 10 times more powerful to say something out loud than to keep it to yourself, which means it's 40 to 70 times more likely that bad things will happen if you say negative things out loud. So the power of the word, it's real. The science and the research backs it. So you really need to become aware of your self-talk, what you're saying to yourself, and most importantly, what you're broadcasting to the world. Now, getting back to the story I wanted to share, when I was 12 years old, I was so hard on myself. I'd mope around the tennis court. I would cry if I lost tennis matches, and my parents didn't know what to do with me. So my stepfather, Miles Cortez, a prominent lawyer in Denver, he wrote me a poem. And the poem he wrote me was called the Champions Poem. And it was all about how you win with class, you sometimes lose, but do so with class. You keep your head high, you walk proudly like a champion. And I used to read that poem every single day as a 12-year-old, and even as a 15-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 25-year-old. every step in my journey, I had that poem in my racket bag or my backpack to pull out and to read. And when I share that in my keynotes or like a workshop that I did last week for a Vistage group, they are so moved. They're like, we need that poem, or we need to actually write that poem for someone in our lives. One gentleman who sold his company for $1 gazillion, he was crying and he was like, we all need to write a champion's poem for someone in our life. And more importantly, we need to write a champion poem for ourselves. We need to write something to ourselves about how freaking amazing we are and all the great things we're doing. And so here I am talking to 15 leaders in a room in an intimate setting. And this man is saying everyone needs to write a champion's poem to someone else and to themselves. 2 days later, I'm speaking at a private school in Denver. I do 4 classes. It's a slightly catered message. And then at the end of the day, I speak to the baseball team because they got wind I was there and they're like, can you come do a bonus class? I'm like, I'm all in because this is my message, especially my why around my brother. I probably had 4 or 5 kids come up to me throughout the day that walked right up to me, Seth, and said, I really needed to hear that message today.
Mm.
I was struggling. I've been struggling and I needed to hear the statistics and how if I just breathe a few minutes a day and focus on my heart, I can regulate my nervous system and I can feel calmer and I can feel gratitude and I can deal with my anxiety better. Who knows, those 4 or 5 kids, they're suffering in silence. And now all of a sudden they hear this message and they're now going to shift. And so it's adults and it's kids. We all need to be living in this zone of excellence with these practical, tangible tools and strategies that work. It's no different than having a solid forehand or serve with great technique. It's building these fundamentals every single day. And that's my why. I wake up saying, if I can change a kid's life, or if I can have that corporate executive say, we are writing a champion's poem, that's the ripple effect that I want to get out to the world. Because this is how we can offset all the nonsense and the junk that's out there on social media and the messaging we get on TV and the news and all that. This is the playground we need to play in.
Yeah, you mentioned forehand, backhand, executives, supervisors, managers can be really in touch with stats and key performance indicators and manage the levers and not necessarily even manipulate, but cause performance and produce at a certain level. And you can have a great forehand or a go-to stroke. But if you can't govern and manage under the stress, which we already said is going to be there, the great forehand doesn't matter if the stress is dominating you or overshadowing you on the court or in your work life. And I think, you call it the zone of excellence, the flow state, this poem that you just shared, that you referred to, that these students really were hungry for, in this gazillionaire that was in tears. I mean, it just goes to show that there's such an appetite for this, the third dial, I'll call it, that mental, emotional, spiritual side of our whole ecosystem in our performance. I mean, we could talk about tennis all day long. I'm more interested in this conversation about how we bring our self-awareness and manage our conversations, what we can learn from Eric's story, your brother, who's near and
Right.
dear to your heart and is now near and dear to my heart by proxy.
Mhm.
Djokovic, in his 60-minute interview, talked about his inner talk. And he said, oh,
Sure.
I'm making it up, but he said there's a devil in there. And he talked about how there's a war in his mind. And we think, oh, he's trained, he's this, it's all second nature and everything. And even at the top, statistically, tastes and aesthetic aside, he's the greatest of all time across the board on every level of tournament, every measure as far as those stats go. And even he's dealing with that. And it's just very interesting to see that you're with high school baseball team after school, kids in a classroom, corporate leaders who have more money than they know what to do with, and we're all connected. There's this connective tissue that we're dealing with, this inner conversation, this inner voice. We're not enough, and then how does that manifest itself? It's
Yeah.
just fascinating to me.
It is fascinating. And, when we were talking about the pro fundamentals and this mental emotional side of things, it all works together. So Novak Djokovic at 36 years old, he's dominating players 10 to 15 years younger. Like you said, it's not an accident. He has a cutting edge holistic training and program. You know what he says? The most important part of my day is the night, putting my head on the pillow. He focuses as one of his top techniques is his sleep and his sleep hygiene. So if leaders, if high achievers say, you know what, my morning routine is really important, but the morning routine actually starts the night before when you focus on getting great sleep. On the mental side, we talked about the power of negativity and how you have to become aware of that. One of my pro fundamentals is stop saying stupid stuff. And I'm
Mm,
not going to swear here, but you can get the idea
you
of
can
instead,
swear.
you can replace, stop saying stupid, you know what? Stop saying stupid stuff and become aware of your thoughts and your thinking patterns and start to learn how to reframe your limiting thinking, your limited thoughts, your limited beliefs, and then come up with new affirmations, new power statements, new ways to speak to yourself. It takes work and sometimes it takes accountability or a coach or someone to help you, but that's important. And then on the emotional side, we've touched on this of how the human condition is to live in the head, and we won't get into the depth of why that happens. But most people are ruminating and overthinking. I'm a recovering overthinker myself. It's just part of the human condition. But the real magic happens, Seth, is when you make a heart brain connection. When you connect your heart to your brain, and this is where the science really gets cool. The Heart Math Institute has done 30 years of studies, and what they found, among other things, is that the heart's electrical field is about 60 times stronger in amplitude than the brain's electrical field.
Wow.
The heart's magnetic field is 100 times stronger than the brain. So if you think you're smart and you're using your brain, you're not even scratching the surface of what's possible when you start
Yeah.
connecting your heart to your brain. And simple breathing techniques like heart focused breathing and coherence training that get you into this flow state. When you get coherent, when your heart rhythms are coherent, when you're feeling appreciation, joy, gratitude, calmness, you're connecting your heart to your brain. And that's when you have more energy. That's when you get out of your head and into your heart and you're able to bounce back from tough conversations, disagreements, arguments. Your creativity and your intuition goes through the roof. And all of it is accessible. This is not an elusive thing. Yes, is it hard to be in the zone all the time? Of course. But if you practice getting into your heart and into your body every single day, you're installing these new skills every single day. And it only takes a
Yeah.
few minutes. It's not a complicated process. So if I were to summarize, it's like, hey, get good sleep, stop saying stupid stuff, and make a heart brain connection. You do those three things and you watch how your life will transform.
And it sounds so simple, but it's work. It's hard work. It's an effort. But I will say this, saying the stupid stuff, not getting the good night's sleep, and not connecting with your heart is almost equal in energy as it is to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But that moving from here to there, if you will, from not doing it to doing it is where the work is done. And our talk that gets in the way, our obstacles, our pebbles in the shoe, whatever you want to call it, our impediments. As a keynote curator, Jeff, day to day, I'm a vehicle. I'm an avenue for my clients to have keynote speakers that are going to make a difference and ultimately transform lives. And I've been doing this for 20 years. And I really believe this: a speech can change the world. If it
That's right.
changes one life, that means the world is changed. And it really can. These baseball players that you spoke to at a local school in Denver, to the poem that you shared with these business leaders, it can change a life. And you said it yourself, words matter. And you have the science and the statistics and the proof and the evidence behind it. Every morning, and our listeners have heard me say this before, I wake my children up and I say, today is going to be a great day. And I'm telling you, dude, I don't always believe it. And I'm telling you, dude, I don't always feel it. So it's either could be both the heart and the mind aren't in it, but it's a structure for existence that populates my being, that I have those first words out of my mouth to my family say, today's going to be a great day. And then we say life is an adventure. And They're into it, they're not into it, but I refuse to say anything other than that. And that's the power of words. And, I just feel congruent and in harmony with your message. It just struck me,
And Seth,
So,
I feel that in your energy, just as a human. The first time we connected, obviously we've known each other for a long time, going back to the roots of tennis in Colorado. But just getting to know you better, I feel that. Like, I didn't know those were your phrases, but I feel that now. Like, oh, yeah, of course it makes sense. Every day he wakes up and says, "Today's a great day and life's an adventure." That's how you come across. You are embodying, right? You are embodying and living your beliefs, and then they become your behaviors. And so, whoever's listening right now to this, start saying, "Today is a great day" in the morning, and your life will change.
and I will dare I say, I don't know if this is like incorrect, but even when you don't believe it, because you need that structure, words and language are a vehicle which is carrying us through the day. And, sometimes you got to force it. They say, fake it to make it, throw something against the wall and see what sticks. But I'm the one in charge of what comes out of my mouth. Nobody else is saying that today is going to be a bad day. I get to say what I want it to be. Now it's
Yeah.
up to me to go out and make that happen.
If someone is having a hard time, like you said, fake it to make it, and they're saying something and they just don't believe it to be true, I always say, okay, well, there's a halfway point in here. You could, instead of saying today is a great day, if you don't believe it and you don't feel like saying it, you could say, you know what? Today I'm going to work on making it a great day. Today I'm going to find ways, or just keep my eyes open to possibilities of making it a great day. So it's kind of like, I'm not going
Yeah.
to quite say it's going to be if I don't believe it, but I am going to be open and I am going to work on it. Like, when people have a lot of shame and guilt, if I want them to feel more, peace and calm, let's say, if they say I am peaceful and they're like, oh, that doesn't feel good. I'm like, hey, I'm learning to be more peaceful and calm. That's
Yeah.
a true statement. I'm learning.
Yeah.
I'm doing better.
Right.
I'm working with it. And so I think that's really important distinction, is to give yourself space to learn and to grow at the things you want to get better at.
Yeah. And there's Coach Salzenstein at work on the Keynote Curators podcast.
Little tweaks, little
Little
adjustments,
little tweaks, but
and
you know what?
customize.
It's that incremental that has the big exponential impact over time. Jeff, we're going to leave it there. We're going to leave a little bit on the table for to come back and
Love
see
it.
where the journey has taken you. We're going to finish off with a little bit more lighthearted part of our conversation. We call it the hot seat, rapid fire, 20 questions. It's not technically 20 questions, short, quick answers, whatever comes to mind. Are you
Let's go.
ready?
Let's
All
go.
righty. What is something about you that we wouldn't know or learn by having read your resume?
I love gluten-free oatmeal raisin cookies.
There you go. Now that there's access to Jeff's one of his hidden sweet spots. Social media, friend or foe?
Friend, because you can hack the algorithm to only to see inspirational stuff. And that's what I tell teenagers. I'm like, let's just hack the algorithm and let's just only focus on the positive. Find the things that just show up in your feed that you want to learn and grow with.
What's the last thing you read?
Well, the 30 books that are laying out. So I'm reading a book called Self Mastery of Love, or thereabouts, with Don Miguel Ruiz. He wrote the Four Agreements. And
Mhm.
then actually going through a course right now about how to reset your vagus nerve, which is about regulating your nervous system. So I'm a
Ooh,
total geek and nerd when it comes to self-growth and self-development. So I'm always reading books like this.
awesome. Yeah, I've got apart from my, Bob Marley, Beastie Boys, Dolly Parton, I have Arthur Ashe, but I have a lot of those types of books as well. So kindred spirits. What is the last thing that you've seen streaming or that you're interested in watching or that you've watched that's touched you?
So this morning I work with a woman and do neurofeedback. So she puts these strobes on my head and we're trying to work on getting my prefrontal cortex to be even more efficient. Like I am in the matrix. I am doing stuff to make every day a great day. And I was doing that at 7:45 this morning. And when we do it, as the brain is doing its thing, she has me watch a Netflix show while my brain is just working in the background. And so I'm watching a quarterback where it's the NFL quarterbacks behind the scenes, Pat Mahomes and the journey. This is back in like
Sure.
Kirk Cousins. It's fascinating again to see what these guys struggle with, what they're working on, how that's the hardest sport, the hardest position in sport is being a quarterback, I think. And so I was watching that this morning.
I've asked this question to photographers about cameras. What's the best tennis racket?
I play with a Babolat Pure Drive. It transformed my career. When I was 28 years old, there was this guy named Andy Roddick that burst on the scene at 18, and he was playing with this blue Babolat Pure Drive, and I was serving 125 miles an hour, and he was serving 136 miles an hour. So I said, I'm 28. I haven't broken the top 100 in the world yet. I need an extra 5 miles an hour on my serve. So I switched to the Babolat Pure Drive, and it gave me that little stick, that little extra power to bomb my serve.
And that racket still is in play today. I know. I think TM uses it, or Team, however
Yeah.
it's said.
I think a few
Yeah.
guys they usually play with the one that's less powerful, but I was cheating a little bit and got the one that had a lot of power and a lot of stick
A
in
lot
it.
of extra juice.
I needed it.
All right. So we're going to finish there, Jeff. I think that, we had a conversation that spanned a lot, but mostly we were centered on, getting what's coming to my mind is really generosity of spirit to oneself, that grace that you alluded to. And then when chaos, tragedy, breakdowns, resetting happens, you also need to summon that generosity of spirit, because nobody is resilient or has grit or persistence without having that flexibility and that forgiveness in there to continue to move on, and rather than kind of flagellate yourself. So I just want to acknowledge you for your generosity of spirit, coming on, sharing something so intimate, your journey with your brother, which is continuing in a powerful way. The insights that you've learned from being a top 100 tennis player, your elite performance, coaching that you're doing, and the keynote speaking that you're doing. I know you make a difference for our listeners, those that have come back to listen to this podcast. Thank you. Those that are first-time listeners, we appreciate you coming along. Continue to share with your colleagues, your neighbors, your friends, your family, and expand on the Keynote Curators tribe and our podcast listeners. So thank you. And we appreciate you joining us. You definitely are smarter for it.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.